let's go ahead with our additions, deletions, and the adoption of our agenda.
A couple of things. One, I'd like to remove the Parks and Rec committee report from the consent agenda. There's some additional things that need to be talked about under that. And so I can talk about that in Parks and Rec. So I've got a few things to talk about other than what's on John's report.
Well, we have John's report, so why don't we just leave John's report so we can keep it in there. You can give us a park update. How about that?
Okay, just take it wherever you like.
You're going to stick you with it. No. We'll stick you before the business owner focus group. We'll put a 12A there and Mike Park and Rec update. All right. Anybody else?
Yes. We don't have, nobody has tomatoes, right? So you can't throw tomatoes at me, right? I'd like to add something to the agenda. Only in so much as we give it proper time, I know we'll probably go over the results so far from the survey and Robin's report. But when we sign those in separate lines, just so that we've got a separate timestamp for that, so that we're not pushing all this together.
We can make it 7B.
Okay.
Survey. Check. All right.
Before we do that, is Robert, are you prepared?
Again, I can pull up the survey and answer questions.
All right. I just didn't want to put you on there if you weren't ready.
It's fine. We'll see how quick I am.
Okay.
It's a test.
All right. Anybody else? I want to move, I know Amy came tonight so we could talk about the permit form. I'd like to move that to right after the county presentation, if that's okay, so Amy doesn't stay long.
What are we moving up?
Number 9, to after the comprehensive plan. So if Amy wants to go on to her family, she can. Okay. Anybody else?
Motion to approve the agenda as amended.
All in favor? Do I have a motion for the consent agenda?
Motion to approve consent agenda.
All in favor? That leads us to...
I'm sorry, who seconded that? Thank you.
That leads us to Mr. Jim King. Come on down.
Hello, my name is Jim King. I'm a planner with Union County. And with me tonight is Bill Lang. She's a planner for Union County as well. She's the newest member of our team. And I won't take much of your time because I know your time's valuable, so I'm going to kind of breeze through this. I hope everybody's had a chance to look at this.
Real quick, what Jim gave you guys is slightly updated from the slides that I sent you guys in your packet. So just know there are some updates, but otherwise it should be fairly similar.
Sounds the same.
Okay, well, good.
So, what we'll do is I did bring a PowerPoint, but it looks like I'm the only person who's going to be able to see it. So, if you're ready to work on the information that you have in front of you, we can just do it that way. All right. So, we'll start off with the first slide, and it's what is the comprehensive plan?
Oh, I think I can get it.
Cheryl is the only one that can get this to work, by the way.
That'll work. I can put my glasses away.
Now I gotta find where it is. There it is. Okay.
You just have the slideshow.
Should be at the very top to the right. That'll work. So what I've done here is I've gone through and I highlighted what I think is important information. But just very basically about a comprehensive plan. Comprehensive plan document so that our elected officials can make sound and judged decisions when it comes to land use and other elements of the comp plan, budgeting, public works, water and sewer extensions, all that kind of stuff. Next slide, please. So what is our vision? The county started off this process by trying to create a vision. And for you have right here what our vision is. Vision really we want to clearly communicate the plan's growth and infrastructure improvement strategies for implementing our goals and objectives, address education, transportation, water, public safety, and other multi-jurisdictional issues. Looking at things such as the right to place various land use in the right place to make sure that we have the right elements where they belong, convenient accessibility between retail, residential, and employment land uses, preserve the rural character of our community. There's a lot of farming that takes place in Union County, and enhance our community connections for parks, agritourism, parks and recreation.
Jim, quick question. Do you want questions at the end, or do you want us to ask you questions throughout?
It's
Okay. Because the second item here, high density and designated areas.
right.
Who defines those areas? Based on what?
Okay, so when we get into scenarios, we'll kind of talk about that. As we move on to our next couple slides, they'll talk about how we have a coordinating committee and we have subcommittees, and those subcommittees actually, they'll meet once a month, they have a topic that they discuss, they make recommendations to the coordinating committee, and the coordinating committee ultimately will make recommendations to our elected officials.
And are you working specifically side by side with the Public Works Department and with the Department of Transportation?
We have a strong communication with Public Works. Public Works is actually waiting for our scenario to move forward, because that's going to determine how they manage their master plan for the Public Works water utility extensions.
The reason I asked that specifically is because right now the DOT is kind of in disarray. Be a nice way to put it. You can fill in the blank any way you want. Mismanagement, lack of funds, missing funds, poor vision for the future. But even though the DOT is doing their thing in their way, the county continues to grow without the infrastructure in place.
You're right.
And that's the frustrating part. When I sit down and talk with the county commissioners, it's, look, you know that you're putting a 2,000 home subdivision on a 2-lane farm road that was never designed for that. And they said, oh, the road's going to be approved. I'm like, well, what, in 10 years? And they go, yeah, but it's going to be approved. I'm like, well, yeah, we have to deal with the problem for the next 10 years. And if you don't put the infrastructure in place, or if you don't wait for the infrastructure to be there, you got to stop approving like Park Place and some of these other big subdivisions that are just boom, 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 and there's no infrastructure. I don't even start talking about water and sewer or any of the other issues related to that. Schools, electricity. That's what I'm saying. How closely are you talking amongst the different departments, whether Public Works, Planning and Zoning, Department of Transportation, county commissioners, because they're making decisions that I don't think are well-educated decisions.
We do work closely with our Public Works Department. In fact, we have what we call a TRC every month, and that's when new plans come in, we get building inspections, environmental health, public works, fire marshal's office, planning, and we look at these plans and does anybody have any questions? Does anybody have any concerns? So, amongst ourselves, we do have pretty good communication. And we try to relay that information to the board, but as we were discussing earlier, us as professionals, when we, just like tonight, when this presentation is over, my job is done. And it's to the elected body, it's now their job.
Yeah, but sometimes politicians like me are stupid.
I wouldn't say that.
Sometimes we are. I mean, we don't make the right decision, and you know, you've got professionals who know this stuff inside and out, and unfortunately, you're not the one making the decision all the time.
And the bad part of it is, we have to have some type of control mechanism in place because the growth is coming. We can't stop it from coming. So we got to figure out what's the best way to manage it. And that's what we're trying to do. And hopefully that will be a very strong element of this plan that we're working on right now.
The only other thing I'll add to that is when we've talked about our comp plan, and the same thing in the county, they're going to have a chapter that talks about transportation types of things. So even if, you know, the coordination with DOT, I think DOT is kind of hunkered down and they're just trying to stay afloat at this point. So they're not, they're trying to figure out their own stuff. But the scenarios you guys have come up with and are vetting with the public were influenced by what we know about the transportation system as it stands.
Exactly.
My issue is that you put in a new subdivision.
Oh, I understand your issue. I'm just saying that part of the plan does have that stuff wrapped into it.
My thought process is this. We may end up in a traffic jam if somebody puts another subdivision out here on Newtown Road that's going to be 2,000 plus units. My issue is not the traffic jam. My issue is more fire, rescue, things like that. That infrastructure isn't there either. I don't mind sitting in a traffic jam. My issue is more overall safety.
And there's other things you have to take into consideration. I mean, if the county was to build that by right, then that's going to be 1 acre lots. It's going to be stripped out. It's going to make your transportation issues worse. Because people now have to go a lot farther to get to their destination. And it's not managed correctly. It's really not. So, yeah, I mean, sacrifices have to be made. It's just choosing the right ones.
I think everybody on this council ran on a ticket of controlling the uncontrollable growth, which is a contradiction. We're doing the best we can, but we can't necessarily, we don't have a magic wand to fix it.
I understand.
Unless you continue, I'll get off my soapbox and let you continue.
We don't either, but we're trying to get as much as we can.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So going to the next slide. This slide right here basically is just showing the process, the stages. You know, we're hoping to have the scenarios done and or have a scenario chosen by August, and then start moving into the actual drafting of the plan. Next slide, please. This is being in the second portion of our process. We wanted to get the public's input, so we had 3 public meetings. We had one on the 8th at River Springs, had one at the Back Center on the 9th, and then any down high on the 10th. Next, please.
Jim, interrupt you for a second?
Yes, sir.
How well populated were those meetings? How many people did you have?
The best attendance that we had was at Indian Trail, I think we said about
15, 14, 15.
yeah. Not as much as we hoped for. So this map right here is slide showing why do we need to update. And you can see the areas of concentration where it's going. Then you can also see the migration in and out of the county. The warmer colors, the reds and oranges, the yellows, that's all people leaving the county to go to work. The greens, that's where people are staying in the county for work. And the thing is, growth's coming. There was a growth projection that was given to us in by 2050, what was it, 50,000, 70,000?
Houses or
People moving into the county in the town frame.
47,000 per day.
40,000 per day. That's a lot of people. It's 4,000 a year. So where are we going to put them all these committees, with the exception of the municipal and county staff committee, are made up of citizens. So we're looking to the citizens to guide this process and to guide the development of the plan that we're putting forward. So then we get to where we are today, and that is the scenarios. And there's a couple of questions that you kind of ask yourself. You know, like, are we looking for more flexibility? Or are we looking for places, you know, to concentrate commercial development? What about schools? Should we allow schools by right anywhere in the county, or should we have regulations in certain districts in which they are allowed? I will tell you this right now. Probably the biggest magnet that's out there is a school. You build a school, you're going to have all kinds of subdivisions. That's where the subdivisions go. So controlling schools can play a very important part in all of this. And I understand schools are all together where the land's cheap.
Right, but the schools are already kind of over capacity. And so how do you deal with that catch-22?
Well, and we did have a gentleman from the school system come up. What's his name?
Don?
Yes, Don. He came over and he was talking. He said that there is no capital improvement plans for new schools. What they're looking at now is rebuilds. He used Piedmont as an example. So they're not looking at building new schools, they're looking at taking existing schools and rebuilding them.
There's a lot of people even questioning whether that's being done appropriately.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
the one good thing I can say about the school system is they are doing a lot of land banking for the future, which is tremendous. They're actually being, forward thinking about getting land now and setting on it for the development to happen around it. But it's not really the controlling factor, I think, as much as you're pressing. I mean, school. If you build a school, yeah, there'll be development around it, but that's not what's controlling the development.
Well, a lot of things that's controlling the development is going to be land prices, accessibility to schools, or those taxes.
I mean, you can just look at the new schools that have been for 17 years. My daughter started at Wesley Chapel. His was split off to Antioch. His was split off to start the Marvin cluster, the Cuthbertson cluster. So, I mean, those were huge. And when those Cuthbertson and Marvin schools went in, what was around it was nothing like what it is now. Coming to your point.
And I think one of the biggest things we got to take into consideration here is taxes. Are we willing to keep low taxes, or are we willing to raise taxes and spend some money? That is a fundamental question. And the other thing that's really important here in this is county and the municipal staff are great. We work very well with each other, and we want to maintain that relationship. In fact, if we get something to rezoning now, and it's on the borders of Wesley Chapel, we ask Robin for her input. Now, we can't necessarily require them to do that, but if they put conditional rezoning, we can put it in as a condition, and they have to agree to it. So that's one way that we work with, and the municipal government's the same way. They got something going on in their periphery, and it's going back up the county, they ask for our recommendations as well.
Well, Robin does a great job keeping us informed, and like you say, if you ask 10 residents of Wesley Chapel why they moved here, the two answers I get most are good schools and low taxes. And that's been historically since I lived here.
Well, you can't look at it this way. Yes, I know that over there at is it Longview or Highgate or some of those neighborhoods over on the road, they're real expensive neighborhoods. But you can get a house at 1/10 of the price there that will be the same house in Charlotte. And that's why people move there. So, out of the three scenarios, the first one is we can stick with our existing land use plan. But let me tell you, this existing land use plan is very aggressive. It was adopted in 2014, and what the commissioners were doing was we had just got through the recession, and they're trying to promote growth. And look at where it's got us. Next slide, please. So the only thing I can tell you about the existing plan is nothing will change. I don't think that's what everybody wants, but that is an option. We want to leave it on the table. So, going to the next slide. This is the management scenario. And you can look at this and tell that there is a huge difference between this graphic and the preceding graphic. A lot of the areas that were yellow and orange have been removed. We did keep the commercial nodes and the mixed residential along our commercial corridors, and any corridors such as 16, 75, 74, and 601. And the purple you see on there, that's employment corridors. That's where we try to encourage employment to go. So that if you have a rezoning request on one of those corridors, it's not really like a spot zone. So we got something arranged for it. We'll allow it. Now, moving on to the next slide, please. And I pretty much went on several of this. I did want to add one thing. In looking at your graphic in front of you, you'll see that all the municipal limits are grayed out. And within that gray, you see some light green areas. And you'll probably see better on this than seeing with there. Those light green areas are transition zones. What that means is, we're looking at those are donuts or holes, is what we call them. And it's an area under county influence, but it's surrounded by either a municipality or multiple jurisdictions. So, what we're proposing as a county is if somebody came to us and said, I'm looking at this little green area right here, and I want to rezone it, and I want to get 4 units an acre. We're going to say, well, our current zoning only allows for 1 unit an acre in this area. And our land use plan does not support a rezoning. So if you want to get a higher density, you can get out the municipality. And it's there to try to get rid of these ground homes and encourage people to get a voluntary annexation and annex into the jurisdiction surrounding. Now, on this plan, the commercial nodes and the mixed residential along our edge corridors, it stayed the same as it was in the existing land use plan. So I think I've covered everything on this next slide. So we're just going in.
I just have a quick question on the well inspections, and maybe it's just the way I read it.
So
My question is, it says you have to get an inspection before you get an occupancy. Why don't you do something to guarantee that you have safe for water before you let them build?
a lot of times the well comes in after they pour the foundation and everything, because you know with this large machinery around the well.
No, but I mean some sort of testing to prove
Well,
you put in a well.
Yeah, and here's what this means, and this is what we're trying to do. There are so many wells in Union County that have arsenic and other heavy metals in them. And the county's got a program that's basically $5 million, and that's an emergency water line extension. But it can cost $40,000, $80,000, $100,000 just to run that water line with one person. So what we're looking at is, okay, well testing. Well testing, we can require, but does that need to be something the county's involved in, or is that the cost of it? Is that part of their due diligence in they buying the property? And the management scenario is saying, yes, we're going to make this a requirement that they get that well tested. And if that water's good, and if it's not, then they're going to have to figure out how they're going to do it. But in the advanced plan, we're looking at ways that we can actually implement strategies, such as could we start a program where somebody's got a bad well, that we would subsidize the cost of getting filtration versus running a water line. Because we could do a lot more infiltration systems than we can water lines. And so we're helping out a whole lot of people. But The only difference between the advancement scenario and the management scenario is we've got to find a way to pay for it. And so that's going to be put on the referendum for sales tax, get the voters to then vote it in. And they would be requiring, you have raising county taxes. Are the county citizens willing today to, have this, to get these, advantages, to have this money to implement these scenarios?
Because we're talking about water, I just got to notice today that even though I'm on city water, that Union County is having issues out at the top of the basin with their water supply. We may have cloudy water for a while.
Well, it was a turbidity issue in May, and we found out it 2 months later.
Yeah.
That's what I had a greater issue.
Well, the timing is, the thing that was really the thorn in the side was the fact that we're paying 3% more for water at the same time that we're having issues with the quality. You can either have the increase, you give us good water, or you have the low water quality, you give us a discount. So you can both.
I would do that one 2 months since the price increase.
Absolutely. And we're not talking about just being over the standard. They're going almost double to what the water standard is.
I will tell you this, that the new county manager is trying to take a lot of proactive steps. In fact, he's reorganized the management setup of the county. He did away with their executive directors. Just here recently, I guess, about the past 9 months, they changed our public information to a communications department. There's multiple people that are trying to, gather that information and convey it out to the public. So the county is really trying to take some proactive measures, and hopefully that information, this new manager wants to be as transparent as possible.
Oh, I agree. The communication is great. They're telling us all the bad news quicker. But it's usually bad news that they're communicating to us.
But I will say, I understand the water issues, particularly in the eastern part of the county, with the wells and everything else. And, I, as the resident of Union County, be willing to support them getting safe drinking water.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, I don't want to have pay increased taxes or a referendum that's then going to be used to bring in more growth. That's not what we're trying to do. So.
Well, and some of the things they talked about in there, if we had the money, then we could partner up with the municipalities to do a park project. Or we have more money to throw out to help NCDOT and push these transportation projects up on the list so we get them completed sooner.
Well, it's hard to swallow a word like that when you say that, partnership. Because right now it's been the partnership between us and the county is we're going to put high density here on your border, here on your border, and there on the border, and there's nothing you can do.
Well, in this scenario right here, it reduces that. Because if you look at it, it's either going to be 1 unit per acre in the green, or it's going to be that yellow, which is going to be maximum 2 units per acre. So,
I've read through the whole document. I understand the plan. It's a great plan.
well,
Whether it will be executed is the question when it gets to the boys upstairs.
I totally understand and concur with that.
This is what the staff is doing before the meeting.
Yeah.
I understand that.
So where we stand right now is, once we come up with a scenario that our citizens want us to pursue, then we'll start writing the document. The document will be basically laid out with the different types of land uses, all the different components. It'll talk about those components. It'll talk about goals and objectives, and then it will talk about how strategies in there and how to implement those goals and objectives. That's going to be the general layout.
Can I ask what direction the county commissioners specifically gave you on this project? Did they say anything to you before you started this, or what? Were they giving you any leading areas to go after, or did they just say, bring us what you recommend?
Well, back last August, they had this song. And at that time that we went to them and said, look, it's time to up. typically you want to update a range plan every 5 years, and here we are, we're going 6 years into it. Plan's out of date, and it's not doing what it's supposed to be doing. And so they said, okay, then you go out there and you solicit the input, and you find out what our citizens want, and then let's develop something that's going to be in the best interest of everybody. And that's what we've done. And I mean, really, this plan is being developed by the citizens of Union County. Staff's listening to what they say, and staff basically will lay out those goals and objectives, and we got to come up with strategies.
As a expert in your field, or your experience in your field, which scenario do you like best?
My personal preference, being a professional planner, I want to spend the money, I want to spend the time.
You would go with the advanced map,
But general public, my guess, and on the whole so far, is the advancement scenario or is the management scenario that both I think they're kind of hand in hand. And that's another thing that we're asking of you guys tonight is if you look at the front of your handout here for the PowerPoint, there's a web address, and it is case sensitive, so you have to type in just like that. But that will take you to a website that basically covers everything I just told you, and goes in more detail. And at the very end of it, it's got a survey, and we encourage everybody to take that survey. The more responses we get, the better direction we'll have.
How many responses have you gotten?
65, yes.
And how long has it been active?
2 weeks.
Now, I will say, if I can jump in here real quick, I sent you guys the link to this already. We've been pushing our survey. So just think when we talk about the survey, at some point we're going to have to cut it off and then really push for our residents to take this survey as well to make sure that the county makes the decision that the public wants. I didn't want to, and Amanda and I talked about this, and Deb and I talked about this too from her communication standpoint. We didn't want to push both surveys at the same time because we didn't want anybody to get confused. And so we kept up with ours, and then once we're ready to stop ours, we'll push the counties. Because that's just as important. The county survey is a little bit more difficult because you hit these tabs and go through the scenarios. But there's a spreadsheet. If people really want to get into the weeds, a spreadsheet that gives you all the details. And I think the response rate being what it is now is because people think that they can just look and click a few buttons and then they realize how much they have to read and understand.
Yeah, this is an interactive
And
survey.
people will come back to it.
Yeah, so, yeah, it's not just, do you like this, do you like that? It's, which one do you like, and tell us why.
Have you seen our survey and related to planning and zoning questions?
No, sir, I have not.
Well, and
I'll be happy to
which,
take a look at it.
and which scenario did you say is winning so far?
It's hand in hand between the advanced and the management.
But the old one is definitely,
Yeah.
that's good.
And, on the staff level, I think that,
We've had some interesting conversations, and
Yeah.
we've had some tense conversations, but they've all been very respectful, and I was happy to see the transition zone concept.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure we were going to get something like that, but I support that.
But the transition zones are basically in both the advancement and the management. They're basically the same thing on which one?
yes, the advanced and the management is the same thing. It's to encourage the more higher density to use that local municipal jurisdiction, transition and excellence.
So the survey is 2 weeks or active for 2 weeks. How long do you anticipate it being?
We're going to keep it as, going to the 24th, because we're trying to get as much information as possibly can, because we really need to get it, in order to stay on schedule, we need to get into it right. And that concludes my presentation, so if you guys have any questions, I took you one minute over.
Can I jump in real quick? Do you want to talk about all 6?
Okay, so the county commissioner is going to have another summit on the 6th. And what they're really looking for you guys is one, for you to talk to your citizens, for you to talk to your friends and your family, to show them this presentation, discuss it, have them take that survey, get us as much information, get us as much input as possible, and it's your opportunity to say, hey, look, I think the county's going in the right direction. I don't think the county's going in the right direction, or we think it's going in the right direction, but we would like to see this, and this. That's the whole purpose of the summit, so that the county commissioners can hear your voice and hear what you have to say.
Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't.
So what time is the summit?
It's August 6th. I believe it's from 9 to 4.
Yes.
But it might be something closer to 8 to 5. They requested, and correct me if I'm wrong, at least one elected official and one staff member. Everyone's invited, but they need to make sure that they have enough room with social distancing. And so at least one of each. And then I think the morning is the planning. So you guys will go over the growth scenario, with some feedback, and we'll talk. And then the afternoon is going to be public works talking about their plans and where they're working through it. Is that correct?
That's correct. And like I said, what is happening here is public works is waiting on us to figure a scenario out and start to develop that. And that's going to give them an idea of, okay, well, this comp plan's come to this, so that we need to make sure our master plan addresses these concerns.
We will be sharing your survey.
Awesome.
What's the location on this 6th meeting?
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure of that.
More venues,
The
that's
accent.
Yeah, I think the Ag Center is the only thing big enough, really, but,
Yeah, Jordan Hanson, he's our transportation planner. He's actually shepherding this process. He's the one planner that has the most time on his hands.
Sorry. I'm
Well, but I assume that you'll share the operation.
as soon as I get it, yeah. You're going to send it out. He's going to make you.
Yeah, actually, he's serving our country this week.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, he's got orders to do some stuff for the military, so that's what he's doing.
So we need to, since it's not on the agenda, this meeting's going to be before our next meeting, do we need to make a decision on who's going to do this now?
That's what I anticipated. I didn't make it a separate agenda item because I figured we'd just talk about it at the presentation. So that.
I will say to Jim here that I think everyone on council agrees that we kind of get the idea, the feel for the residents in Wesley Chapel, what they're wanting, what they're looking for. If we didn't, we wouldn't be sitting here. We've had our own survey, we've had our own meetings, public information meetings that we've had for some of the developments. And usually it's the developer sitting up front, talking to the residents of the audience. And they're not happy with this thing. I would be glad to throw this name in the hat to go represent Wesley Chapel at this meeting. My fellow council members may not want me to go because I'll probably speak my mind.
I can go.
Mike, did you go last year? Or did you?
I was at the meeting that we had at King Park, the 2-day meeting. Was that?
You were at the summit, yes. But Brad and I were the only two that spoke. Amanda was also there.
Amanda, Cheryl.
Yeah. I was trying to think if the other council members went, but no, I think it was just Amanda, Mike, and Brad.
Paul was there in the morning.
He wasn't there. Okay.
And so this year they're just limiting attendance because of.
Starting off with, yeah, if there's room, then everyone can go. They just want to make sure that they have room to have everyone represented.
So when are you going to go? That's new. Well, good. Yeah.
I just checked this on a Thursday, so I don't know that I'll be available to go on Thursday.
Man, if you want to be the primary, that's fine. If there's room, I'll tag along. If at the last minute they say there's space, that way you can kind of pull the reins back a little bit, keep it quiet.
Okay. Good plan?
And then I cut you off right before you could ask you a question. I'm sorry.
Thank you guys very much for your time.
Thank you, Jim.
Jim, I appreciate your time, and I understand the job you have, and I know how difficult it is, and nothing personal, but I understand that once you've done with the presentation, it's, I wish it wasn't that way, is the only thing I'll say. I wish you had more input after the fact.
Like I said, I've been doing this for 22 years. When I was younger doing it, I would leave the council member from meeting. I couldn't sleep.
So you're happy to let it go.
So just not here. I let it go.
We appreciate your time. So that brings us to Amy and the permit form. Amy was kind enough. Do you want to speak, Amy? We got a copy of it now.
I think, Ron, do you want me to introduce it, or? You want to jump right in? Okay, when I started back in February, was, it was a lot of paper, and condensed a lot more stuff for residential, whether it's new structure, foundation, compliance, which is that's the, a lot of things can be condensed on one form, so that's what we tried to do. We created some new forms for home occupation, I think we passed last month. And, that's it. We're going to have a checklist for each form too, streamline checklist for whoever's applying can see what need, make sure they have everything they need, whether it's their surveys, plans, their payment and how to pay, things like that. They can just kind of check off, make sure they have everything. But I think you have 6 different. Now we just have 6 different forms. So if you have any questions, I'm going to answer them.
Have you used any of them yet? Or they just
Not yet. Well, I'm going to through this. You guys have to a lot of stuff too that we were talking about it. Amy brought up the checklist. So the checklist that Amy's going to finalize to go with each of these permits is not going to be required to be turned in. It's more of a, when you're filling out the permit, it tells you what to do. A lot of our previous permits, if you guys have seen them, has the ordinance language on the permit. Some permits are 2 pages because of that. We have one permit that's 6 pages because of that. And so we really wanted to cut everything down and put the stuff that they need to know on how to do it, and what some of the fine tuning is on one sheet, and then have the permit on the other. We also, just for my own personal, when someone comes in and asks for a permit and they tell you what they want, and then you print it out and you give it to them, and then they realize it's not what they want, then you have to go find the right permit, because we have a permit for each thing and for each zone. And so it just got a bit cumbersome that we had so many different pieces of paper that pretty much all said the same thing. And Amy did, just so everyone, I think Amy did a bang-up job. I had an idea in my head and we talked about it, and she just made it happen.
I'm not trying to look into the job you did, Brian, Cheryl. Just warn it.
I have a couple of questions. So, based on the forms, is everyone looking to recite type of database?
No, we keep a permit database just for approvals that just Rob and I have access to.
So is there any value in keeping some of this data that's submitted on this in some sort of database that's readily available for other analysis or things that may come down the pipe?
Potentially. Right now, the permit database we have, it collects the permit number, it collects all the property information. So we could theoretically use what we have now and run reports if you guys requested that. And this goes back over 20 years, right? I don't think it goes back 20 years, but it does it really? Okay, well, there you go. I think some things were better recorded at the beginning than others, but
Just that some of the abilities, I know the comprehensive plan, we had to go out through this inventory and other things, and so I think there's a lot of details that may be in that permitting process. It's not, inherently obvious if you're just trying to
a lot of the data in some of those columns, it was hard to search because they put a bunch of data in one column. And so Amy's been actually going through that and separating it all out so we can search it. And so we should be able to do those reports soon. And it's a easier way to separate data too. Okay, yeah, please.
Thank you. I think they look great.
Can I ask a question? Yeah. On the temporary use permit, at the bottom it says certificates of insurance from the applicant and all parties. Now that's only when we do an event at our park. If they want to do an event over at the 201 Shopping Center, we don't need any certificates of insurance.
Okay, so I like that. In order to add, or Dogwood Park events, certificate of
Right.
insurance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So do we need a motion to approve the subdivision?
I don't know. Do you want to specify anything? You have about solid waste, and it says use village services. The only time I can think of that is when you're having a park event and you need an extra emptying of something, but now the town's doing those events. So I don't know. I mean,
When we were talking about that, and Amy can correct me if I'm wrong, and we can change the terminology. A lot of it, the thought process was if someone was going to have an event in the park, and I know, Mike, you and Cheryl, we've talked about this before, if we need to empty the dumpster and potentially passing that charge along,
right, that's what I'm saying. But we're the ones doing all the events now.
well, but someone can still rent the park, can't they? We have a rental policy.
Yeah, for example, we did a 5K where we had to put waste stations about every quarter of a mile, and then at the end, we had to collect all that. Before we even had the dumpster, we were just using roll-off containers for that.
But that was a town-sponsored event. So I'm saying nobody else has ever used it.
If we still want to do we still want to have it as an option because you can rent the park, or would you rather just take it off?
I don't know.
I wish somebody would rent the park so they pay for some stuff.
So you're talking about an event which can produce a lot of waste. If that happens, we're going to case by case basis.
But I've heard a couple of things that are specific to the park. So this temporary use permit is for the entire village.
Right.
And we recognize that there may be certain events that happen at the park which may or may not be tax for the park, right? So does this need to be separated? This is the things for everybody regardless of who's event. And then if it is a park event, there's this section. Some way just to designate that so we can have clarity.
Good call.
Like for the park section, we say, is this a village-sponsored event? Yes.
Well, and the other thing is, if it's an event at our park, we not only do a temporary use permit, we also do a rental with the people. So we're going to be talking to them, and we'll be asking them, are they going to fill up our dumpsters? And then, I think it could be handed outside of the temporary use permit.
Well, I'm happy to get started with the form the way it is, and if we have to make modifications as we go, we
We're
can.
just trying to make it as streamlined as we can. Think about it together. One, we like some more events in the village, of some sort. And I don't need to do one in the park. And then two, at the park, at some point, we hope other people start having events and that stuff.
When you have some forms you use, you don't realize that modifications you made, you get it.
And I think this was last thing, here, the fee schedule matches the fees that we just passed last month.
Yes, I went back and made sure, but I'm going to double check it one more time. But I've been working on these since March, so.
Any other comments?
Motion to approve the new forms with small changes.
Second that.
Effective whenever. You guys,
I'm sorry, you made the motion, and David. Okay. I have one little thing on this home occupation permit on the second page. I think this is in the wrong place. It talks about having to have a foundation permit for a variance, and they're not asking for a foundation permit.
Right, I just copied it.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Thank you, Amy. All in favor? Great job.
thanks for coming. So enjoy your family.
Thank you.
All right, so that leads us to Cheryl signing off on the report and for the minute. And I also want to ask her
Okay. You have the June reports here, and these are preliminary numbers. I'm still getting bills in, and we will still be getting more revenues in. We did get the quarterly state shared revenues for the first quarter of the year, and the numbers were not too bad. Of course, that was through March, so it was 2 very normal months and then 1 month that was a little unnormal. So you can see those numbers in the June column of the budget performance at the bottom of the first page. As far, all our budgets, all our expenditures came in under budget, which is required. And then I sent to you information about the projects that were started but were not completed at the end of June. And I suggested a budget amendment for the paving contract, the playground, and I did not suggest one for the MAPS contract. We've paid most of it. We couldn't seem to pin her down on the very last part. I can transfer up to $1,000 between accounts any month, so let's see what she sends us for a bill. It could be $200, it could be $1,200. I think we can deal with that then. So I do propose a budget amendment to appropriate fund balance of $42,178 and appropriate the fund balance fee in lieu of $85,287 and increase expenditures by $115,965 for the playground and resurface the parking lot $11,500.
And can that be done in one motion?
Yes.
Can I have a motion? So motion. Second. Any other discussion?
Yeah, Cheryl, I know this is a lot of accounting stuff that I don't understand, but how much of this is going to be sucked out of the new fiscal budget that's not going to be subsidized by our previous fiscal budget?
This is all coming out of fund balance, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not spent in what we approved.
Okay.
So it wasn't spent in the last fiscal year, so it goes back in the fund balance. Fund balance and budget starts this year, we're going to pull the money out again, so no impact to anything.
And I think we were anticipating to pull out around $30,000 of the fund balance for this year. Do we have a?
No, we didn't take any out. Well, I'm looking at the wrong thing.
So
I don't think we had any.
Right?
Yeah.
It's about 30, isn't it?
I think it was less than that. I think it was in the 20s.
But this way we don't touch the contingency money, right? Which is a record thing.
This is all just a timing problem. If they had gotten that paving done in the middle of June, if we'd gotten the playground done,
I agree.
we would be good.
What about the Bobcat rental? Because you said you were going to pull that out of the new budget.
Yeah, well, I just said that,
We've only got money in there to do that once.
well, we have 2,400, yeah, so twice. It's up to council if you want to, do this in addition to what you already budgeted, but we do have budgeted money.
I mean, if you get a Bobcat in line, and realistically, you want to do more times in the next 12 months?
We try to group all these projects
Yeah, so.
so that we can bang them all out. So maybe again in the spring, that's might be it. Okay. I'm good with that.
Any more discussion? All in favor? Unanimous?
I think that's all.
So Cheryl sent out some information on Dropbox to make it
Okay.
more convenient for people to be able to drop off and stuff. But she did not get any feedback from us.
The Dropbox is in the mailbox.
Yes.
Mhm.
Trying to remember what.
So it's basically, it can't be attached to the existing mailbox, it has to be like a separate box, and it seemed like we're
I have my notes here, yeah. You remember, Mike, do you remember when you installed the mailbox? You would have to install a new one for this drop box. So I don't know what cost you
There's a
would,
couple ways we could go. When we originally talked about it, I thought we'd be able to do something where you take either the door or the window by your office and put kind of a mail slot in it where we can put things through. But if you want to have a freestanding parcel or document drop box, they make those kind of things. And I had done some basic research on what they would look like and what you would expect to see. But it's very similar to just a regular mailbox sitting out there, either attached to or added to our. We own that mailbox. We bought it and installed it. We put a section on the side or something.
we can't add on to it, no. The postmaster won't let you.
So here's what Cheryl
The costs I came up with were about $300, and then whatever you would, that includes a post, but it doesn't include whatever you would need to install it.
Installation.
It costs us $265. We could match it in color.
So the whole reason we were asking for this was like in the situation where the office is closed, because we're going there again, that developers and others that need to drop off the larger documents really didn't have a mechanism. This would keep somebody from having to be here, or if they drop it off at 5:15 at night, the office is closed. It's just a convenient way to do it.
And this is like 17 by 15 by 8, so it's not going to hold plans. You know, it might hold this, but, you know, not one of the big rolls of plans. They have to deliver those in person.
Well, those are, I know when they're coming in and I can make arrangements like I have been. But I think also one of the reasons I suggested it too was to get the checks for the permits and to drop the permits off, because a lot of our people use carriers and our couriers, I guess that's how you say it. And so when we were closed, they had to use the regular post, which took 3 to 5 days. And this way, their courier can just drop it off.
And there's no way we can have a slot in our existing mailbox
No.
or incoming to the town hall mail.
No.
Well, we got a slot for outgoing mail in that box.
And we can't touch that slot.
Even your mailbox once is probably done with
How big is the opening?
For this? I don't know.
You don't see it?
Yeah, I didn't see any of the information.
You have to remember here, because I don't know my computer is.
It's probably most of the width, right?
But, I mean, to the point of like, I just say, if we're going to do a box, let's get the right size.
Can we make it? Can we get a bigger one?
I don't have my computer up right now.
I mean, that'll work for checks and basic permits and stuff, but if we want to use it for plans, we'll need to be.
How big would you want it? I mean,
I'm not going to get stuff out of
Let's see. Post mailboxes.
I can't tell how thick the opening is. I mean, do you think like a thick manila envelope could be put in it?
yeah.
When this originally came up, I thought of the type of mail slot you would find in a door or a window where it's just basically.
Well, I think when I brought it up, I said that would be enough.
Push it in, push it.
The incoming mail is
Take the product, slip it through, and then you're going to find it on the floor when you come in.
Right.
The other problem you're going to have is who's going to be checking the box on a regular basis to make sure there's not a check.
the mailbox.
The incoming mail deposit slot is 12 inches wide by 1 1/4 high.
That would be bigger.
I don't
Probably a
know.
little bit longer and a little bit thicker, because we do get some thicker envelopes.
So we'll have to.
What size would you want then?
I would think at least 16 inches in width and probably 3 inches in depth at a minimum. Again, if it's just one permit, it's one thing, but
Going back to Mike's statement, why can't we just install a slot in what we have without putting up a new box?
Was post on the set, we can't touch it.
No, you're talking about into the window.
In like window.
Something like that.
Yeah.
I can see that.
door is glass.
Yeah. So is this in the picture?
I think there's more security in having a separate box so that if there's checks or anything else, they're not just floating around the floor and it's to the point that it's a big glass door people can see. I'm sure everybody just crowds around you waiting to break in and steal money, but.
So let's say we're gonna do a little more research, okay? Robin, will you see if you can find something that fits your needs?
Well, we bought our original one from mailboxes.com, and so I was trying to get something from them to be similar to what we had. So that was where I was
So we just
looking.
need Robin to measure and tell us what size object she needs to be able to put into the box.
And Mike, is
Sure.
that what you're interested
I
in?
think if you could just find something a little bit wider opening, like deeper and wider.
I've got your
I
16.
like the idea of the
That
pedestal.
way.
I see you saying 16 by 3, so
There are
let's see
some
what we have.
disadvantages, especially with the kind of doors we have, that you can just reach in and push the bar on the door and that's, not that we have a lot of valuables here. I mean, somebody breaks into
You
town
say
hall.
that now, but then someone will eventually break in and do damage.
And I was also wondering about this, the structural integrity of the building, the fire safety rating, all that, when you now have a hole in your building.
I had a drop box for
Snakes.
for my business where people would drop stuff off at night and I'd get it in the morning. I'd have a little form, I'd have a stack of little forms for them to fill out, and somebody grabbed the stack of forms, poured it all together, lit it on fire, and shoved it through the box.
We don't want that.
We don't want that.
We don't want that.
And I remember you telling us that, yeah.
So,
Okay, so we're gonna do table we're gonna let Robin figure out the size she wants, maybe, or?
Well, I think.
She just gave us a size.
Okay,
Yeah.
so Cheryl's gonna.
We'll work it.
That brings us next to the planning board report.
Yeah. I'm going to do that for John today, if you guys are okay with that. Just kind of what John does is normally tells you what we talked about and tells you what we're going to talk about. At last month's meeting, we went over the RA40 changes that we've been talking about, and at this month's meeting, they're going to be hopefully making a recommendation to you guys, so you should see that in August. Fingers crossed. We are going to, at last month's meeting, we're working on the tree ordinance. They hadn't seen much. They saw a couple pages. The draft of that is now complete, and I'm meeting the urban forester about another issue this week, and so I'm going to talk to him about that. But the planning board will get a draft of that to help kind of keep these ordinance amendments moving forward. You guys should probably see that in a couple of months. Once they can react to it, we can work through it. We went over kind of what was happening with the comprehensive plan and then the ordinance updates that were required to do. And that was pretty much it. David was there, and so was Mike, and so they spoke to some of the issues in council, which I really appreciate. One thing that keeps getting brought up is a post office, and Deb made a point at the last planning board meeting to ask John to bring it back up to you guys about investigating the post office. I just know that I am supposed to make sure that it gets back to you guys that citizens really want this. And can we look into it again? Brad did it before. I don't remember anything of that. I wasn't involved, so I don't know details, but
We weren't big enough.
we weren't big enough. We need to have at least 10,000 residents or more to justify them talking to us about a post office, and I think we're 9,000.
Then can we get something from USPS that states that, so that if we're asked again, we can point that out and say this is what.
Well, I'm
And
sure.
also something you could only ask like once every 10 years.
I think we
I
did
think it's
that.
time, I think it's time though. I think
Do you want me to get you the information I have and send it to you?
Yes,
So
please.
maybe some original documents and
Because
stuff.
if it's related to population, I say let's wait to get the census results before we ask again, instead of asking and then having to wait another 10 years.
And Cheryl, remind me what you said instead about a little box, even just like a blue box. I said something about we had to guarantee.
Oh, a Dropbox, mailbox? Yeah, they like to have at least 500 pieces of mail a day.
Which
Well, that's fun.
we're not going to come up with.
Well, those have got to be new specs, though, because, I mean, you look at Mineral Springs. I think Mineral Springs only has 100 post office boxes of that many. That can't be, there's no way they get 500 pieces of mail a day in the drop off. box.
Well, and the other thing is with the postal system, if you have something that's been there for 50 years, you may be able to keep it.
Yeah.
They're not going to build a new post office, and none of the existing post offices we use are big enough to take all of us in. Plus, we hear that they get paid by addresses, so Monroe won't want to give up 2,000 to Waxhaw, and Waxhaw won't give, they won't want to give them up to each other. But none of those post offices can take on the whole
The
town.
postmaster's pay is directly associated with the number of people that they serve. So if you don't want to give up your customers, it's going to affect your paycheck.
But again, as council, I think we need to have a specific answer to this as opposed to speculation.
That would be great.
The shortest answer I've given people so far is we're not big enough yet. That seems to suffice.
There's no channel in South Dakota, but never mind.
And
That's always the argument you hear.
There's a lot of legacy post offices around here and very small things that aren't even towns.
I've got mail in the blue box. So Cheryl's going to look into that.
I'll go dig through some files.
And if it's been, depending on how long it's been, then we actually research
And
it.
if the requirement
There's
is
more
the
than 7
population
years.
and it's a 10-year, let's get the latest number.
That's a really smart idea. Again, that was just something brought up at the last planning board meeting. This month, we have to establish zoning for the lots that we just annexed. They will be, my recommendation is going to be the residential Union County that we have set up for that. We have a preliminary plat up for review and approval. That is for another phase of Heritage. It's actually only 17 lots in Wesley Chapel, so it's relatively small, but it is a whole new section for them. We will be hopefully finalizing the recommendation on RA40 to give to you guys. We will be looking over the tree ordinance draft that is now complete, and go over the survey and anything else associated with the comp plan. The other thing I will do, maybe if they want to talk about it, is right before this meeting, I sent you guys staff reports that I've been sending to Union County. So as Jim had mentioned earlier, if there is a conditional zoning plan on our borders, typically Lee Jensen, the director of planning for Union County, will send me the the concept plan. And I can send these to you guys anytime. But Lee and I were talking about what's the best way to get my thoughts across. With Crestwinds, Lee and I had a meeting, and it was just verbal. And so now I wanted something a little bit more formal. And so I've basically written a staff report like I would do for us, but I've written it reviewing those plans in relation to our land use. And so I had originally, when I drafted them, I sent them to Amanda. She wanted to see them and to be able to respond to the public asking about it. She's reviewed them, and then she says, yeah, this looks fine. And I send them to Lee. But I did send them to you guys today before this meeting. You guys and planning board. So if planning board wants to talk about any of those, we can talk about that under other business. They had also brought up last meeting about who's keeping track of all of this development. And so I had sent out a web link, and I think you guys had that as well, to a county tool that they have that shows you a map and shows you all the developments that have come in. And then it links you to the site plans. So that's the report on the planning board.
Robin, I did get that link, and I did go to it once, but it's not going to be something I go to on a regular basis. I would much rather you keep us informed of the goings on at that level, because it's just one of those things that you probably are on there all the time, but I'm not.
I actually don't even check it all the time. I check it more when someone tells me to check it, or if I know something's coming in with a lead. I really rely on their staff so that I don't have to spend 15 minutes a week or something checking their website to see if that's a new one or not. And thus far, it's been pretty respectful. And we've done the same. We have a conditional zoning request at the Five Stones Church, and so they have that site plan. When we start moving forward on that again, they will get the updates.
So can you put like a link to that site and we'll blurb or something on the website, on our website, so that these people that want to know everything's going around, we can easily point them to the county site.
I think we can. The last time we added something to the website, though, Cheryl, you said it was starting to get a little too busy. Do we want to put it on like the planning website
Yeah.
and then put something on the front
And that's
page?
the website, not necessarily the landing page.
So one of the sub-tabs under planning and zoning.
Wherever's appropriate.
We already have a planning and zoning
Yeah,
webpage.
just some way to make it appropriate when somebody's going to come to the village, you want to see stuff, we can say, hey, check out the county.
Do you have that link already, Cheryl?
If you can just go ahead and send it.
There's a tab that shows the land use plan and the zoning plan, and then we put a tab below that that talks about the county plan. That'd be a good place for it. Since we're talking about planning and zoning, I wanted to let everybody know, Robin, if you don't mind jumping in here.
I guess not. Sir.
This was the plan that everybody got at the corner of Beulah Church and White Sunday Trail Road to designate this is White Sunday Trail Road, this is the roundabout, this is the Dennis Bolger property above it, and then his market is directly above that. I went to public information meeting on this. A couple of things are the plan that we got is an older version. There's not as much structure inside. Originally, this is all unincorporated Union County, but this first lot here is in Wesley Chapel. It's an undeveloped lot. The last time we looked at this 2 years ago, in order for them to have this gas station, they were going to have to annex this property into the existing property, and chose not to do that only because it was part of Wesley Chapel. That would have given them access to a full turn left and right. You'd be far enough away from the roundabout. The DOT says that they will approve this plan with a right in, right out only. So that's where we're at right now with that. They said that it's been approved by the DOT, but I'm not 100% sure of that.
It doesn't necessarily, because it's conditional, just as an FYI, it doesn't necessarily mean they're ready to get a driveway permit. It means that the concept works and the numbers work. And DOTs are really involved with that.
The developer says it's been approved by the DOT. I can't confirm that as of right now, because originally they were going to have to take over this parcel to get a driveway in or a driveway out.
But right in, right out on Beulah Church, you're going
Both here
east, yeah, you're going east on Beulah Church, you go right in, you come out, you make a right, you go to the roundabout, you go back the way you came, great. You come out White Sandy Trail, we're going to go make a U-turn.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, which is why originally the plan was for the developer wanted a full service left and right out of there, and he's given up on that, just so he doesn't have to buy the extra parcel and deal with what's the job.
I definitely agree with that part.
Well, it was a very contentious meeting. Most of the people that showed up at the meeting were not happy about it, and there was one lady specifically who lived in this parcel in the new subdivision going in on Indiana Church, and she had a lot of concerns about light pollution, noise pollution, hours of operation, all kinds of things. So most of the people that I sat in with were here. The meeting was held over off of White Sunday Trail Road at the developer's office building, and it was only big enough to support 8 or 9 people in the room at a time. So if you do 8 or 9 people, they would leave another 8 or 9 people. They would leave another 8 or 9 people. So I just want to give you that update.
And I have it on our resolution list that we're discussing.
That's on you.
Okay. All right, Robert?
All right, next is the survey discussion. Is that correct?
Can I ask you one question? When
Yeah.
I was reading over the minutes from last month, it spoke to me that we had talked about doing a 160D timeline. So I just wanted to ask.
I haven't done that yet. There was a class that I took, and one of the suggestions was to create a spreadsheet
Okay.
of what is necessary, where does it, if it was required, preferred, whatnot, what it actually entails, and then a column of where it is in our ordinance, and then what our suggested language is. And so they suggested to do that, and I'm in the process of developing that, and so I won't have a good idea of the timeline until I do that.
One other thing, planning board related, is there any way that we can encourage the planning board to have some resolution on the RA 40
You mean it's an upcoming meeting?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this at length while I was on many times. So it's like in November. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to move on this or whatever.
Well, that's the plan. The plan is to give them the final copy and say, do you recommend it or not?
Yeah, we can debate it for another 2 years.
That's about right. Carolina, survey results.
Survey results, I can admit when I'm wrong, and so I had talked to Amanda. I wanted to close the survey on Friday, and Amanda said, no, let's keep it open. I'm going to do more pushing, and she did a lot of pushing, and we're now up to 662. So we went from 550 on Thursday to 662. Depending on the complete total numbers, we're looking at anywhere from 15 to 20% response rate. I say that because some of these are a husband and a wife, and so the number I'm using to standardize it is how many postcards we sent out. So how many different people did we send this to? And so, we sent it to one address, but we've got 5 responses. So we're looking at, again, 15 to 20, closer to
15 to
20.
20% of the homes or parcels have responded.
Have responded, yep.
Wow.
So that's pretty good. I will say we have, I sent Amy a spreadsheet based off of results at about 450, and we had maybe 15 households had duplicate entries. Not the same person taking it twice, but probably a spouse. I haven't gone in to tweak it out on all of them, but typically you'll see the husband take one and the wife take one, and I know that that's been pushed.
I took it twice just to see if you catch me.
Oh, yeah, you're in there 3 times, so I think the wife probably took it too. So, but yeah, there's about 15 of those. Otherwise, residency, we have, she caught a bunch of people that weren't residents, but we do have 22 people said that they know they're not a resident. We have 5 people that say they have no idea. And then what I will do once this is closed out is reference the ones that we know are not in Wesley Chapel, with whether they said they were residents or not. And because we have an email, I will send them an email and let them know if they're not in Wesley Chapel so that they're aware of it. But so far, it's about what we expected. Not many business residents have done that, but they didn't necessarily get a postcard. I think they should have. But I think like the shop's management company or the shop's owner got that postcard and should have talked to the business owners, but who knows. No shock that the majority of people think it's growing too fast in Wesley Chapel. The majority of responses for what type of new development you prefer, the highest percentage we have is 65% want small or local businesses or restaurants. We do qualify that because later on we ask, where do you want new business? And they all want it. They basically want Aston to finish. They'd rather that than new subdivisions going anywhere. That's the general response we get. It's taking me a little bit to sift through this, but again, large lots, single family, residential lots, 82% of the responses support that, so no surprise. 60% of people do support conservation subdivision. Of those that didn't, people are worried about the houses being too close together. That's just good information for me to have, because what we can do with conservation subdivisions is we can require lot width to make sure that the houses aren't super close together. And so we can kind of counteract that a bit within that ordinance. Biggest concerns about growth are increased traffic, infrastructure not keeping pace, the quality of the roads, and then school impacts. I don't think that shocks any of us either. One of the things that shocked me, and I'll be honest, is we have a question, would you support zoning with larger lot sizes? And I think the total is 75% of people say yes. Now that's broken up. 33% say yes, 1 house per every 2 acres. 10% yes per 4 acres. And then close to 40% say yes, any. Just do it. It doesn't matter. Normally you get a really kind of even response rate across the board. That was very stark. It's very important to retain the rural character of the village. Zoning requirements generally are considered adequate, but the next highest was that no, they would like more space between homes. So again, that's a consistent thing we're hearing too, that our lot width needs to be increased. 60% of people say they're familiar with our land use map. That's good. When asked what changes you would make within the village, the majority, this comes up as a word cloud, so you see the words that people use most. The majority of people want roads. There's a lot of traffic that we need to deal with, and development. Now, yes, in the survey we do tell them that we don't have control over roads, but obviously it's still a major concern. What type of non-residential uses for economic development? Small local businesses, so that's consistent. Again, Village Center has 60% of the vote for where to put it. The rest of the 40% is kind of smattered along. So everything is represented there, but mostly Aston. Most people that have taken the survey do come to Wesley Chapel for most of their shopping or stay in Wesley Chapel, so that's positive. People want restaurants. That's the main thing that we're hearing. There's all these answers because it's an open-ended question, but restaurants is the key thing that they really want.
I like Chick-fil-A, but I'm tired of eating there just once a week. Twice.
Well, not necessarily fast food restaurants.
Well, like I said, we need more restaurants.
Yeah. Typical commute is actually about an hour, 30 minutes to an hour for a lot of our residents. That's consistent with some of the mapping that has come out of the county too, which is why this is kind of the area where a lot of that high development starts to stop. Because at this point, once you go past us, they pay less for their houses and want to be, they'd rather have a nice house and be somewhat close to where they work. A lot of people support sidewalks and greenways. Greenways outweigh sidewalks, but not by much. So we do want that. People do want a mix of, some people want the village to put in the sidewalks and greenways. Some people just want the greenways to be developed by the developers. And then some people say, just do both, where you can. But walkability is important. That's coming through.
Well, I don't need to cut you off, but we're going to get a full report when this is all finished out.
Yeah, so I don't have to go through all these. If you guys have specific questions.
So the gist of it is very good participation, very good representation of the properties in the village, and so far pretty consistent with things we've been hearing over the years. Mm-hmm. That's my takeaways. So it's a good, and I look forward to the detailed report, and we will have plenty of questions.
And I personally don't want to close it yet. It doesn't mean that we should, I don't think we should, if we're not going to, you don't have to necessarily keep pushing it through the Sunshine Law and through Facebook, but we could have Amy reach out to the business owners. Hey, did you get a postcard? Have you had a chance? Can I email it to you? Jan wants her to call around and get all their information anyway. Or
we already have it.
so she can call and say, hey, did you get a postcard? Or even she can go through the list of subdivisions and we can help her figure out like Price Mill's got it like $3. Well, if you didn't get a lot of responses from Price Mill, shame on us. But like we could go through and Amy we could try to connect Amy with one person in each subdivision and see if they will make sure that their neighborhood has gotten it one last time.
I sent it to every subdivision that I had contact info from. One or two of them. I think one was Lindenwood. Maybe it came back to me. So
yeah. I'm not ready to give up yet. Yeah, even if we don't actively push it every day, because I understand we need to push the county survey.
You want to say by the end of the month?
I don't want to say.
Because I was going to say that force it out the overall timeline of everything we're doing when we'll get to the analysis. I see no reason to close it and then just let the data sit before we're gonna act on it, when we could keep it open to get more input.
Because we could also make sure, and you're going about your day, you run into somebody in the day. And the other thing I want to do, and I haven't done it yet, is I want to ask the PTO board if they would be willing to send it out on our behalf, because they have a lot of parent addresses. I just haven't had a chance to do that yet. But even on, you're at the grocery store, so you can go in and be, hey, you taking everybody? I mean, I just, as much as we have spent, I would like to try to still make a little bit of a personal effort.
If you get that 15 to 20 up to 25 or 30%, I'm all for it.
So 30%, you're going to be looking at about 1,000.
I would like
So
to
you
do
need
that.
350 more, roughly.
Yeah.
I will say, and this is what I've been telling Amanda all along, surveys typically run 3 to 4 weeks because after that, interest just drops. And so having it open, and then the question for you guys is having it open a week, if you're going to get maybe 50 more people, is that worth it to you?
Yeah, to me it is.
So that's just the decision you have to make. I will say, I need a close date. And I think that'll help you guys sell it too, because if you say you only have until this date, all those people that are like, oh, I'll take it tomorrow, will be like, oh crap, I've got to take it before I forget. You don't have to do it tonight, but I do need a close date so that I can button this up, put the report together, and then move on to something else.
How many people responded that are not residents? Amy told me she had quite a few of those.
There's 22 that have said that they're not residents. There are 5 that said that they don't know. And then I haven't compared it with her spreadsheet, but it's about the same.
She said she had a lot of people that said they were residents and they weren't. That's what she told me.
She doesn't have the data to say that. She just looked up addresses. She only had the data for addresses. So are there quite a few that are not residents? Yes. But it's not that much different than what people have self-reported.
Mm-hmm. I'm just...
The answers are these.
Not that I know of.
So they're all gone.
They sent them out for us. We didn't get a bunch. They sent them
Just
out.
trying to think if we've got a few of these, I know we've got my home address on here. I mean, where could we post these? Like at the park or any place?
Probably
where-
the businesses, you'd have more, but you'd have to ask.
I'm wondering if you're going to start getting all non-residents, so...
Well, that's what I'm thinking too.
Yeah.
Because the non-residents have jumped up. I mean, we've gotten double in the past week and a half that's been open. But I'd still rather have something than nothing. But it's up to you guys. No pressure. I do what you guys tell me to do. I just know that I need an end date at some point.
I personally would like to spend a little more time since we've spent so much money.
Define a little bit more time, 2 weeks.
Well, I'd like to talk to Amy and let her see if she calls to the village shops and calls them all, or did you see her? Or if she goes through the list and we try to definitely get her contact in each neighborhood to say whether or not the neighborhood's seen it.
I understand phone calls, but at the same time, we could give her, I'm sure we got a couple of these we find. You can take mine and just have her go around and instead of calling, just drive over there, go from shop to shop to shop.
Well,
to
she's
shop.
not workers' comp for that.
Well, there's that sheet, then someone has to be in the office.
Yeah, she's got her.
I would suggest that we go about 2 weeks, let Amy try to do additional reach out, and at that 2-week point, reassess where we're at, and maybe Mail all agree that we're about everything we can do perhaps. So compromise, and if things are going well and we're getting a lot of responses in, we can just keep it open.
I'm fine with doing it till the end of the month, which gives you that 2-week period. And if we can get up to 30% response, awesome.
Do you know how many you have by subdivision?
I can probably figure it out. I mean, there's a way to figure it out, yes. I just don't.
I'm just thinking, it'd be interesting to know if Stonegate is really low and Price Mill's really high, and
And then we could focus on the neighborhoods where we know.
at least look at like the top 8 subdivisions and
In
the
order
biggest.
to do that, I have to spend time analyzing the data, which I don't think I have time to do right now,
Okay.
to give you guys a response and enough time to do something about it. But I do think that we can do that for the report, and that way you guys know in the future, if that makes sense.
If you had data and you did, like by street or something, I could probably look at it and pull it together because I'm pretty familiar with neighborhoods. I don't know. I'm just offering.
Okay.
Something not to be relying on work off the staff. And let me think about that.
But I think Amy could probably scrape together a few more. even if she has to reach out to each subdivision again, between all of us, we know somebody in every subdivision. And if
How
we don't
about,
jam-
I'll send you all a list of the subdivisions I do not have good contact info for,
Yeah.
and if you can give me a person's email,
Because my contact in Lindenwood bounced back. It must have been the same one.
info@Lindenwood, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So,
The only other thing I can think of is if you have that list of subdivisions, Amy can also look at the permit database and see if someone recently got a permit from them, and we have phone numbers. You could call somebody and say, hey, do you have a contact for your HOA? So we do have contacts in those neighborhoods.
Mhm.
yeah, anything that we can do.
I think a lot of them, you guys will know somebody.
Yeah. And I will try to reach out to the PTO this week. But if y'all also know any other groups, like
WCWAA, do they have a? I know that they're huge, but it would be for people that live in Wesley Chapel.
I'm not going to ask Becky Paul around your website. What? Becky Paul and WC that they take website and Chris Roberts. Could you give me their information or talk to them? You always ask.
What, did you say Chris?
No, Becky Paul.
Oh, okay.
That's their website.
Muffling.
You always ask. And then we will also have Cheryl and Deb push something about the county survey.
Okay.
And I had asked, and I don't know after listening, I had said that maybe as the village we should be like, we really prefer this approach. But if both of these two ones that are getting good feels give us that little transition zone, maybe we don't. Maybe we just say, please take it. It's time sensitive.
Time sensitive. I would say if you guys wanted to make a statement, it would be, please look closely at the management versus the advance. I think those are the names, not the existing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're upset with, and we can play with the wording, but if you're upset with the way the county is currently rezoning, consider that that is the existing land use plan.
I heard three things from him. The existing one is more aggressive for growth, which we don't like. And then there's the other two, and the difference was taxes.
Yeah, it's basic. The way they explained it to us is that the management one is an updated land use, but it's keep everything where it is now. The third one is really the county investing in programs to help with the different things like water, poison.
But would make taxes go up.
It
And I
would make
don't think
taxes
that's going to be...
So they have to understand that.
Well,
Yeah.
could we say,
But I don't think you guys necessarily, as a village, need to say
right?
increase taxes or not, but just
Well, we
say
could
for
say-
land use.
Could we say that we like the transition zones proposed, and this is why?
Yeah, and I would say in these two scenarios, and then let them pick from there. I think that would be smart.
Will somebody write something up for us to put up?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay.
Y'all good with that?
Do you? Should I just send that to you for your final over?
Sure.
Will you and Cheryl?
Yeah, send it back to us. And then we'll get that to the sunshine lesson to Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
Robin, do you have anything else about the survey you would like to say before we move on to focus group?
I think I'm good.
So on the focus group.
Oh gosh, sorry, that's me too. I'm like, I have time to write something. Focus groups, essentially, you guys have all of the information on that already. That is just, can we form them based on my recommendations? I don't know.
And you put all the non-resident ones in groups that, like environmental and stuff like that.
Yeah, that has a regional kind of look for it, because I didn't necessarily want to turn somebody away, and I think their input's valuable, but there are certain things that you don't necessarily want a non-resident to be giving you their policy ideas on.
So, everybody good with focus group? Do you need somebody to make a motion?
Motion to accept the list as presented.
Any more discussion? All in favor? Unanimous. All right. That moves us to consider approval of updated code enforcement.
Sorry, Rob, but that's you as well.
Yep, it's all, it's
You
fine.
keep hammering away at you.
I had a lot to do, trying to get through it. So when we talked about code enforcement last month, the onus, I guess, on staff is to come up with financial procedures that outline it. We had the initial stuff that we had talked about in previous council, but now talking about what happens with the attorney and how we interact with that, and then what happens with payment. So we added that on here. Cheryl and I did talk about this after I sent it to you guys. I'm just going to be honest. I realized I had to do this like 2 days before I had to get the stuff to Cheryl. So that's why I sent it to her and asked her input at that point. So we will switch anywhere it says village clerk / finance officer. It will just say finance officer. So it's the proper position. This was based off of emails. Now, George, we hadn't had your feedback before we did this, and I don't know if you've seen this. You can look at it. About payment. Cheryl had done some work, and Cheryl, you can speak to that, reaching out to the tax collector's office to really figure out how that would work.
Right, and then George sent me an email, and I've sent it on to Van at the county to make sure that we're talking about the same things. I don't know if George wants to explain it. It's a little legalese.
I think the difference between the liens, right?
Yeah, it goes back to the whole idea of what you have a lien for. You can get by statute, you get a lien for expending funds to abate a nuisance, basically. You go to clean cars on somebody's lot, you spend money to do it, you have an automatic lien. And the county had responded to Cheryl and say, well, that's subsumed within our tax lien agreement with you, basically, the gist of it. But this is a little different in that we're talking about suing to collect the fines and then obtaining a judgment. And so my question back to Cheryl is do they mean that they would also collect the judgment lien? Which would make sense. It's really no different at the end of the day. But I think that's what she's waiting on an answer from.
They're going to talk to their attorney.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we really can't approve this yet.
Potentially. But yeah, we can fine-tune the finance if you want. At this point, this is the way I'm moving forward for this case.
Yeah.
The other thing, so if we can't officially approve it yet to think about is, this week I'm going to be giving a civil citation to somebody else. And so I don't think that... Underwood. And so I don't think that's going to be cleaned up in 15 days. I've given them a lot longer than most. The homeowner has some extenuating circumstances, and I've been trying to work with them as much as possible. She's no longer working and is ill because of COVID and all these other things. So I've been trying to be helpful and yet still move forward. So we're at civil citation. Do you want to progress in the same way, or in this case, do you want to try the abatement stuff, where we go through, and I don't understand exactly how to do this, but I do know the people at Indian Trail that do this, and they will help me work up a procedure for that, in which case we would hire somebody to go and clean it up, and then we'll put that lien on their property.
I kind of brought that up to Robin earlier today. We've spent a lot of money with our attorneys. Sorry, George. For this whole process.
We bought George a boat.
It's been very expensive.
And I mean, that's the problem with when you go the litigation route. I mean, court's just not cheap.
Yeah. So do you want to try the other avenue, which is we remove, instead of we've asked and asked for them to clean it up, we clean it up. I know they're not going to like it, but we can hire somebody, and then we take those costs and we lien it on them, and then I know the county can collect that.
That would be a whole different set of potential problems.
Well, but again, so Indian Trail does this a lot, and I've talked to them. We do have provisions in our ordinance. I would probably have to come to you like we did with the civil citation and get you guys to approve the way I plan on doing it before I can do it. It's more stressful on me, but that's part of my job. And you guys will get some more complaints, because essentially we just have to make sure we notice it properly, because otherwise I'm basically going on someone's property and taking stuff off their lawn.
Based on the situation, like you said, this is the first time we've really had to do it this way, and given the circumstances we're currently in, I'll just say it that way, How about contacting the homeowner and saying, look, here's the 2 routes we can go, which is least painful for you? Do you want us to come on your property and clean it up and send you a bill, or do you want us to sue you?
Either way, they end up paying, except, when George does it, we're adding, not only the fines, but we're adding $5,000 of legal costs.
Yeah.
So, it's not cheap either way. I mean, if they would just clean up their own lawn, it would be
Maybe
the best.
should we try it? And see which way we like better? See which way we like getting up people?
The only thing I will say is that all the notifications have said that they would get the civil citation and would be sued. And so I
think you
talk
have
to
to.
you.
I think you have to look at the ordinance and match up what would be sent out. You have to have, yeah.
We've been over backwards in this particular situation. I even offered, there was a couple of church groups that reached out and said, what can we do to help the community? And I said, we brought up this specific issue. I said, this would be a great community service project. If we could just get the group to do it. We'll come in, we'll move everything from the front yard to the backyard. We won't take anything off your property. I tried to, that seemed like the least painful way to do it. And we got stonewalled.
To speak to that directly, I knew Southbrook was interested in helping, and Michael mentioned it. I called the homeowner to talk about the issue in general, and then mentioned we do have volunteer groups that are looking for people to help. If you want help, and gave me Mike's contact number, did not mention that it was a council member, did not force or coerce, and did not let Mike contact them directly. I was the one that did it. She thanked me profusely and then never made a phone call. So
we've been over backwards to try to fix this problem in a logical way. And we just got nothing. And I really don't want somebody standing on their front porch saying we're taking all this stuff, or moving all this stuff. We don't want it. We don't want to take it. We don't want to move it. We just want the eyesore.
So what I would have to do in order to do that is look at our ordinance, probably have another conversation with the Indian Trail person to make sure what our steps are. Then come back to you guys, hopefully next month if I can get that done, for you guys to approve that procedure and then move forward in that direction. The only thing is that delays action on that site, but potentially that option could get it handled quicker.
But Robin, I would ask that you reach out to her personally again and make that offer again, because the easiest way for everybody involved would be to let a church group or something come in and resolve this issue for her. It's the least expensive, it's the quickest,
I got that. But
You've got an old truck, though, in the front yard. How are you going to move an old truck?
I have people that can take care of it.
He's got people.
I mean, it's on wheels. All we got to do is push it. Now, I'm not talking about taking anything off the property. I'm talking about putting everything that she owns in the backyard that is an eyesore.
Does anybody look at the backyard? You can't get past the backyard.
All I'm saying is,
wondering if there's room in the backyard for all this stuff.
If all this
That's
started in
the
the
option.
backyard, I think it would be good. Even if it was in the driveway, they've got just literally right out the front door, they've got this truck with a tent over it, the engine pulled out. I mean,
And lately, it looks like somebody took pieces of wood and just chucked them here and there.
I'm just saying, I suspect
It's
the
bad.
backyard is bad, if not worse.
But it's
So
not
where will all
something-
this stuff go?
it's not something we're going to
I just
complain
need
about.
marching orders.
Okay. So I say you look into it and come back to us next month. If Mike wants you to call her, that's fine. But the first process, can we approve it contingent upon Cheryl finding out that it's capable, it's possible?
Are you talking about the cottonwood?
Yes. The updated code enforcement procedure.
It'll need some changes.
It'll what?
It's what's
That
written is
procedure
going to
will
need some changes.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So I'll take both.
So we'll bring this back in August.
Should I just send
Don't we have a closed session, too?
Should I just send
It's not further than
When will we hear back from?
it's further than- Okay. So both of those are going to come back to us in August. That moves us to Lori and the rule and procedure review.
So this was the item last month. I think David in particular had time to review it, to discuss it. This was essentially to amend Rule 2 so that we could hold virtual council meetings. We can continue distance of the village, because the state has now said that that's possible to do, which hadn't been earlier.
David, I think this is on you, because I think everybody else was ready to move forward last month.
I'm just as ready to move forward.
Okay.
Guys, what are y'all thinking? Laura's giving us
So there was two things. The original rule two said we don't want council members participating virtually, right? So we could either still kind of keep that language or ditch it totally, but we would have to add something so that we can say it's okay to do electronic meetings when there has been a declared state of emergency, according to NCGS 166A-9 with it. And one of the things we discussed the last time too was that if we do this, we don't want it to be a blanket approval just because there's a state of emergency that will do it, but then before each meeting, a decision is made as to whether it should be in person or virtual. Said that instead of just being a blanket, hey, there's a state of emergency, we're just going to be virtually, we'd actually have to make a decision before each meeting of whether it should be virtual or in person.
There would have to be enough timeline to put out public notice as well.
Right. And so the advantage of that is,
outside of a meeting.
you know, we're pushing ourselves
It
to
would be
get back in person.
canvassing outside of a meeting.
But we have the leeway when something happens at the end, we don't miss a whole bunch of meetings just because.
Why don't we-
Have you been watching the news?
Yes, I have. And I hope we're not going backwards. I like the recommendation, and I'm ready to move forward with it.
So you like proposal 2?
Yes.
I just asked George to take a look at it. When you canvass outside a meeting, that sort of is circumventing the open meetings rule, I'm afraid. That's just canvassing people before the meeting. I asked him if that would be going kind of outside the open meetings laws, so he's looking at
Can
it.
we just have the mayor make a decision?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's council making the decision outside.
Yeah, I would worry a little bit about you're doing public business by making a decision about whether to have the meeting electronically or not. I mean, I know it seems silly, right? I mean, it does, but and it, at the end of the day, practically speaking, I'm not sure who would complain, except for the fact that the public, I guess, could be eliminated from participation if that were done in a way. I mean, God, you're only making the decision about
the website. We have to talk to them.
Right.
I would
we have
say-
to have the ability for them to participate
So,
in the meeting. That's the other part of this. We have to
I guess.
public.
I'm sorry, I'm just brainstorming about this after reading that, but you are authorized to have the electronic meetings now. Could one way to do it be to say that you can have an electronic meeting solely for the purpose, like go ahead and say in here, you can have an electronic meeting solely for the purpose of making a decision about whether to have a substantive electronic meeting. Does that make sense? I know it seems a little crazy.
We have a procedure that says it's okay to do a virtual meeting to decide to have virtual meetings as a rule of procedure, and then the next rule of procedure is we can have virtual meetings that we decide each.
I think so. And I think that would work under the new statute that authorizes electronic meetings. And I think, because I guess what I was hearing was from y'all is, no matter what the situation is, we might not want to have an electronic meeting, or we might want to, but we needed a mechanism to decide. So I think if you did that, I think that would satisfy the statutes and the current, the electronic meetings law and the current open meetings statute, I think.
Can't we just make policy?
That's just right off the cuff, though.
Well, no, and Adam Lovelady did say that you could call a virtual meeting to suspend our non-electronic meetings
Yeah.
if we wanted to.
Yeah. At the end of the day, I mean, as we sit here right now, I don't think that you're going to be given a lot of leeway. Like if somebody challenged in court whether or not you had the right to make that electronic decision, I think right now you're going to get a ton of leeway. I guess the question would be a year from now or 2 years from now, if there's something else that comes up,
Well, there
Yeah, I
has to be
just
a
don't
state
know.
of- there has to be a state of emergency that will prevent us from getting together. Would it be easier if we just said it's left up to the mayor?
I think you could designate that power to the mayor to make a decision. Yeah, as long
That
as
way we
as
don't-
long as it were noticed properly and
Right.
you know,
It's noticed
yeah.
properly and the public has the ability to participate.
But instead of getting together as a council, just leave it in the mayor's.
Yeah, I think you can do that in advance
Mayor
because then.
could informally ask her councilman.
We don't care how the mayor gets to her decision.
Yeah,
We
I don't,
don't care at this point, but are you going to care in the,
Who's gonna hit me if I decide the way you don't want to?
well, no, it's have to be in person.
yeah, I can't throw anything from my computer.
In normal circumstances, when you have a mayor and you have four council, if she has two that say electronic and two that say in person,
The mayor,
she gets to decide anyway. I mean,
Yeah. No.
Yeah, I mean, the mayor is the person who runs the meetings
Who
anyway.
can call a regular meeting? The mayor pro tem, or two council members?
be a special one.
Yeah, that's what
I knew what you meant.
I'm fine with just leaving it as either the mayor or the acting mayor in this situation, leaving it up to them to decide whether it's a virtual meeting or a regular meeting.
Instead of saying canvas
Only
council.
in a state of emergency.
And I'm still of the opinion, since July 15th, 1998, we've only had one situation that this would have even mattered. I think we were opening up, I think by putting it into place and making a policy, we're opening up opportunities for it to be abused as opposed to what it could be, what it should be used for.
But that's why the stipulation of only in a state of emergency and only when approved, so it can't become a regular thing.
Do you want to make it only during a state of emergency when social interaction?
No, because it could be something that they make civil unrest,
That's
right?
true.
Which doesn't say social distancing, but it says keep your butt at home,
Yeah.
right? That's a
You want to have a
state of emergency for weather situations.
It could be a physical disaster too, you know, a
Right.
flood, hurricane,
Yeah.
gas explosion, you know, it could be all kinds of things.
And those
But if
situations.
that's the case, are there any situations where postponing a meeting for 2 weeks or a month is going to make that big of a difference?
Well, let's say we had a
It could.
Category 5 tornado come through and wipe out all of Wesley Chapel, which I don't remember having. And then we're all different places. We relocated or, we're not in Wesley Chapel. We can still get together and have a meeting. How do we fix our town?
It could be June and you need to adopt a budget. There's other
Worst
things
case
too,
scenario.
sure.
It makes me a little nervous too, David, but I'm worried that this is gonna go on for a year, at least. And I've been told that once flu season starts, things are gonna get bad.
There's a lot of speculation on the virus.
But-
There's a lot of speculation.
From just a general risk management perspective, just risk management 101, is you need to have, for known or potential risk, you should have a remediation plan, a plan of action. We now know for us, there is a risk that we cannot have in-person meetings, and therefore I think it's incumbent upon us to understand how we best handle that risk so that we can continue the business of the village, which will be by enabling virtual meetings for the council.
Is there any sort of caveat you could put in there that would help you, like something about abuse of?
That's what we thought. As long as Gloria is like, as long as it's a state of emergency, then we've got to have a plan B in place. So let me say, I don't like voting for this, but I know that voting against it may end up coming back to almost even quicker than what any of us anticipated.
And when you think about state of emergency, I can't remember the last time we in this village were in a state of emergency. Now, if we were in the eastern part of the state, that seemed to happen pretty regularly. With the
Hurricanes,
Yeah.
David, you don't feel comfortable with it, just don't vote for it.
Yeah.
That way your conscience will be clear.
Or I can't not vote for it. I mean, vote yes or vote no. I can't not vote for it.
So if you do not vote for it, let me tell you what your vote is.
So Lauren, you want to make a motion here?
Hold on, we gotta change the wording.
Well, a motion that will include the revision.
But you've done it.
You don't want to use my text.
Thank you.
So the mayor or mayor pro tem will determine the need for electronic meetings. And then council office, sheriff, are held blah, blah, blah. Are we keeping this top part, no member who is not physically present? Because that covers regular meetings, and then this next paragraph would cover electronic meetings?
If you, the proposal two, if you read that second paragraph,
That covers.
that's trying to cover that first part. So we're not ditching what's in there currently. We're just trying to make the virtual meeting there with that. So it's reworded a little bit.
Can we change it to, except for electronic meetings, blah, 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 were met, attending a meeting where met will not be counted toward a quorum nor vote on any matter before the council, but will be able, but will be allowed to participate in debate. Just the one word.
Because that's the best one I have.
All right, Lauren, do you want this? Or, are you ready to motion?
All right. Making a motion to amend Rule 2 of the Rules of Procedure such that it becomes Rule 2, electronic meetings and remote participation in council meetings. Electronic meetings may be held per NCGS 166A-19-24.24 in the event of a state declared state of emergency, and all meetings must comply with the statute. During a state of emergency, for which meeting during a state of emergency for each meeting, the mayor, this is council, the mayor shall decide whether the meeting will be held in person or via electronic means. So yeah, that's it. Who's Joe has to type on this?
For sure.
Mayor or mayor pro tem will decide whether the meeting will be in person or via electronic means. Council will also ensure all in-person meetings during a state of emergency are held in a manner consistent with the state of emergency order. Council will ensure all open meeting requirements are met when meetings are held electronically, except for electronic meetings authorized under NCGS 166A-19.24. Any member of council attending a meeting remotely will not be counted toward a quorum nor vote on any matter before the council, but will be allowed to participate in debate.
Well, that last part, if you're coming in remotely.
That's the old, that's to reference the old
Okay.
one.
All right. I'm good. That's your motion, I second it.
Any more discussion? David's going to go on the record that it doesn't need even more funding. All right,
We hope you never have to use
we hope we never have to use it. All in favor? All right, Mike, we've got a few minutes for Park and Rec.
A couple things you already know about from John's report. We talked about the playground. I spoke to the owner of the playground company. They've already taken out the tree stump that's in the way. They did that last week. Thursday or Friday, they're going to start the grading work. Wanted to update you on that. Paving work we've already talked about. The only thing John and I were both concerned about that when they were doing the restriping of the parking lot, they only put down one coat of white for the crosswalk, and we thought it could need a second coat. So he's going to try to get them to come out and do a second coat on the crosswalk.
Is that part of the scope, or all the original scope?
Was to restripe the parking lot, and that included a walkway at the bottom of the driveway and also one at the top by the information board. And then we put down one coat of white, and for the parking lot lines, that's fine. But for the crosswalk, which was heavily cracked, and we thought it could use a second coat. So
It's not in the RFP.
to come back and do a second coat. Bobcat Rental, we already spoke about.
They haven't, I haven't seen them really respond to the request. Yeah.
Right. And I saw John today, and we're talking to John today, and we're dealing with that. Also, going to the Parks and Rec Committee at our next meeting is Diana Bowler and Sandra Bradford are trying to make a donation of a water fountain. That's been kind of on the books for a while. The company that they originally were in contract with is no longer in business. So we're looking at different options for water fountains and locations for that.
Is this a water fountain for drinking or water fountain for fun?
Water fountain for drinking, I got a picture of basically what it's going to look like.
That's fine.
Where's there a water line?
There's a water line to the left of the dumpster by the stub out. The idea is to put in a drinking fountain with the option of the dog bowl at the bottom for the pets, something like this. And then the other option that we've discussed recently is also having a reverse osmosis water fill or bottle fill as well, so that there'll be clean water for people to fill up their bottles like you guys have got here at the table as you're walking in the park. So that's going to go to Parks and Rec, and they're going to be talking about options. They're also going to be talking about costs. The fountain itself is going to be donated. The installation is going to be something that we have to pay for. Also in John's report, we have donations of some flowers for the local gardening clubs. That's already there. Eagle Scouts. Because of COVID-19 and some time restraints, we went ahead and did the Eagle Scout project of power washing and restaining the handrails down to the fishing pier. And I think I sent everybody photos of that to show you what it looked like when it was finished. Hope everybody got that. The policy, or the way we used to do Eagle Scout projects, is we would keep council informed, but the decision to approve or not approve an Eagle Scout project typically used to lay specifically with the Parks and Rec Committee. And we've also got a girl who's going to be coming to do, I think, a butterfly garden next month. She's going to be coming to the Parks and Rec Committee. My general question on Parks and Rec is, does the council need to be informed, or does the council want the authority to approve specifically projects from the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts?
I mean, our policy says.
I know our policy says.
The Boy Scout, and I remember we talked about this a lot in 2018. That while Parks and Rec could meet with the Boy Scouts, that council still wanted that council wanted Parks and Rec to give them a recommendation, and then council would approve.
Is that where we want to keep it?
I have a couple of thoughts, because I thought there was also something about recognition or something. So I know that Eagle Scout, but I know that Eagle Scouts are really a big deal, and a lot of hard work and everything else. It also seems like that if it's going to be something of that magnitude, having the council, even if it is just a perfunctory agreeing with what Parks and Rec has recommended, and then after the project is finished, being able to recognize the scout, I think is a nice thing for the scouts.
And it says that in our procedure.
Right, and that's why I'm bringing it up, because with the scout project that we did during the COVID-19 closure time, if the scout reaches 18 before he completes his project, it doesn't count. So he was running under very strict, he was 17 and a half or 17 and 7 months or something, for him to come up with a project, get it approved, get it completed, get the paperwork done. There was no way we could have done it. Well, I don't think he was expecting COVID-19.
Extenuating circumstances this time, but I think in general they should be planning their projects far enough in advance they can do that. And I don't think it's unreasonable you know,
All right.
planning board meets, next month we approve it, and then when we finish it, it comes and we recognize it.
So you guys want to keep the policy as it is?
I think as an overall, yeah. I mean, like I said, more I understand the circumstances that we're in now, mandated for a different approach, but I'd like to be informed and knowledgeable of what's going on in the park. I mean, that's a really good way to do that.
Well, that's coming up. There'll be a girl who's coming to the Parks and Rec Committee first, get approval, and then council for a butterfly garden.
When is the normal Parks and Rec meetings? What day of the month?
It's always the
Fourth Thursday.
fourth Thursday.
Or
So
Thursday, so there would be,
There's enough to swing between.
lapse between the time they would meet with Parks and Rec and get the thumbs up and then bring it to us.
so there's enough time to do that.
And is this Boy Scout coming back? The one who just finished his work, is he coming to get recognized?
That's up to you guys.
That'd be nice.
Well, I mean, it's in our policy, I think he should come.
And it's in the policy, but I mean, I think it's nice to know a lot of work.
I
I
mean,
guess
I
we
think
could do is say thank you officially, maybe a little letter from there or something.
The other thing is y'all have to sign off on the project, so who would be signing off? Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been typically signing most of the preliminary paperwork after it's been approved. Usually write a nice letter at the end on Wesley Chapel letterhead, thanking the Boy Scout for the project. That's the way it's been done in the past, but we've had some issues in the past with Eagle Scout projects. So
It sounds like we have a policy with this, you know.
Yeah, but Brad sat down and talked to the Eagle Scout people after we got rid of the problem. And the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts were ready to come back.
and
And we
it's
talked about how getting your Eagle Scout award and how the council is much more approachable now. Getting your Eagle Scout, I mean, it's a lot of work. And coming to council and getting recognized is like also a good thing to learn.
I think for them, and especially like when you present this project, yeah, John could come as a Parks and Rec chairman and say this is what they want to do. But wouldn't it be great if they took 2 minutes themselves to tell us what their project is?
all right.
Talking about the skill that would benefit you.
I will relay that to the Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, and the Parks and Rec Committee. Other issue that came up, and we talked about this. Five Stones Church approached us about helping out at the park, and my concerns the last time I spoke about this was related to a potential zoning change coming up and being a little bit of a conflict of interest. And I think what the Parks and Rec Committee and I agreed was we're going to set a volunteer day, and whoever shows up, whether they're from Five Stones Church or not, we will have that volunteer day, and anybody who wants to participate can. That way I don't have to worry about somebody coming back to me and saying, well, you only did a zoning approval because they said that they would do this, that, or the other for you. And we want to be as transparent as possible, and no strings attached to any work that gets done by their organization. So
We also need to get the waiver forms signed by anybody that shows up. I don't have any for that Boy Scout project.
And the last one is a problem that, so we've been open, Parks been open since 2014, spring 2014. We've never had this problem, but it came up last week or so ago, maybe 10 days, where I was in the process of leaving the park after working there that day. Car comes up, parks in the grass, opens up the door, dog jumps out, dog immediately takes a big dump in the grass. And I very nicely came up to the lady and said, ma'am, would you please move your car into a parking spot? And also there's some dog waste bags over there. Would you please clean up after your pet? She said, no, it's okay, I'm fine. And immediately I said, you know what? I'm in my car. This lady has no idea who I am. I grabbed all my business cards off the console. I took my weapon off. I put it in the console. I said, ma'am, I'm a councilman from the Village of Wesley Chapel. I'm politely asking you, please, put your dog on a leash. Pick up after your pet, and please do not park your car in the grass. And she said, no, I'm good. And just kept walking. And I'm thinking, wow, this lady has really got some issues. And I didn't want to lose my cool. I just said, you know what? It is what it is. But I immediately thought of this council, and I'm thinking, if I ask this lady to leave, or I tell her she's trespassed, or call the sheriff's department, whatever the case may be, would I have the backing and the support of the council for doing that? And I'm like, you know what, I better not. Eventually what the lady says is, you know what, if you're going to give me grief, I'm going to take my dog and I'm going to leave. And she threw her kid and her dog and jumped back in her car. She pulled off the grass and went down the driveway. And I was happy that she left. But I guess the question is, do we need a policy or an understanding that if somebody sees something, do something that's just blatantly against park rules? I mean, do we have a rule that says you can't park on the grass? No. We have a rule that says you have to get a pet. We have rules that you have to have a dog on a leash. But we don't have a rule that says you can't run naked in the park either. So,
No, they're just staying along and staying.
well, my point being is if I had gotten confrontational with this lady, I would just sit down. You need to move your car, and you get your dog on a leash, and pick up your pet, or what? I trespass you from the park. Call the police department, have a sheriff come over and take care of it. Do we need a policy, I guess is the question. And if the agreement of the consensus of council is we do, I'll have the Parks and Rec start working on it. I guess the question, first and foremost, is what would you guys have done in that situation?
I'll take up the dog.
Well, I did. I mean, because I didn't want to step in, I didn't want anybody else to step in it. But her attitude was, and we have never experienced this in the 6 years that we've had the park. The attitude was, well, no, I'm fine. And I just was shocked by that. So do we need a policy? Do we need an agreement? Do John and I have the authority to say, you're not following rules to a resident or even a non-resident, and say, it's time for you to go?
I don't think an elected official should kick anybody out of it.
That's why I left it the way I did, and luckily she decided on her own to leave.
We're not enforcement.
I would think that would be a staff issue. We don't have a staff. I would think you just call it deputy.
And say, what, there's a lady parked in the grass, please come and arrest her?
And there's a lady being belligerent.
There's a lady being belligerent, and it's, let her dog run around and poop it on the grass and
That's how they show up.
I mean,
I'm glad that this is the first time this has happened in 6 years.
what do other parks do? I'm sure their council people aren't down there, council people are.
No, but at the same time, I think we're in a little bit of a unique situation because as often as John and I are there.
And I wouldn't want John to do it either, because y'all might get shot.
Yeah, there's no authority.
That's why I brought it to council instead of, I asked Dina over at Waxhaw, and she said that they have a policy, and the enforcement is they have their own private police force in Waxhaw. So, do we need to work up a policy, or do we just need to say, common sense, and if somebody's not doing common sense things, to call the sheriff's department? It just seems weird to say, hey, can you come tell us how you not to park on the grass? Can you come tell us how you go pick up your dog? That just seems to me a little.
If we had signs, if we had signs that your expected behavior was acceptable or not acceptable in the park, right? And signs that say don't park on the grass, signs that say pick up after your dog, signs that say keep your dog on the leash. All that's, totally out there and everything else. And then it feels very reasonable to, say, yeah, these are the rules. But I don't think that we need to get in trying to enforce it unless they're doing something that's being really disturbing to the peace. That's what the sheriff would do.
Yeah, I agree. There's going to be people that push the issue no matter what. And I don't think we need to write a policy about somebody parking in the grass.
No, just let it go. All right. I brought it up because I wanted council's input.
But if you do feel like you're in a situation where somebody's being belligerent with you, I think you should call a deputy, without a doubt.
Well, luckily it didn't get to that point. Hopefully it won't happen again for 6 years. All right, that was it as far as park updates, other than what John already had in his report, which is very detailed. Next.
All right, so that brings us to two items that Jan wanted on the agenda. The first is she wants council to consider creating a business owner focus group. She wants to get a list of all business owners in Wesley Chapel and introduce herself to these people. I said I would put it, she was going to try to come today if she could, but she came an hour earlier today for a staff meeting. I think she was pretty tired. She also said that she has a scan, I think, July 28th, is that it? That tells them kind of where they go, what do they keep doing chemo, like what do they do, like what's their next course of action on the 28th. So keep her considering positive thoughts and prayers if you wish. I don't know, what are your thoughts considering creating a business owner focus group?
I think we need more information to figure out specifically what the goals would be for that group. I mean,
It seems a little weird that Jan's not an official mayor position right now. She's stepped aside temporarily to be doing these things, and I would just suggest we table these to a later agenda when she's back. When she can represent what they are, because there would be if she's wanting to have a focus group that she wants to meet with, I don't know what to tell her.
And I'm rather focus on doing well right now.
absolutely.
And David, you want to speak for me for the next item?
No, I mean, I would say I would be okay with my dog doing anything to facilitate and encourage economic growth and development around the village. But by the same regard, I think that she needs to focus on getting well right now. And to your point too, Lori, right now she's not an active member of the council. Let's wait until she's back so that we can get an ongoing dialogue with her on what's needed, what the goals are, or what she's looking for with that. More so than just, hey, let's start a focus group.
And I'm sure she would say that she told me everything, but I really didn't. I mean, I think her goal is eventually economic development and persuading Aston to build out, but honestly, business and economic development is not a passion of mine, and it's not a project that I want to put on myself at this moment in time. Nora is hiring a technology intern. She wants somebody to help with social media presence and communicate, all sorts of stuff, and that stemmed from when we were interviewing Amy. We interviewed a guy who was really looking for stuff to build up his resume. So she had the idea of an unpaid internship with different universities to help us with that kind of stuff. But again, that is not a project that I want to man, and I would rather Jan focus on being healthy. But I told her I would add those to the agenda. So
Table these two until the agenda was returned.
everybody go with that? Do we need a motion for that? To table these till she's back? All right, so that brings us to discussing any changes to operating procedures. Jan and I did meet with staff today. We're doing a great job covering the office, backing up Amy when she has other things to do or time to take. So they covered when she was on vacation. The governor is speaking Wednesday. Who knows what that will hold? So I don't know that as a council we can make any changes or even discuss what may or may not happen until after that. I don't know how y'all feel, but I think we should just table this one to August also.
Absolutely.
Right.
Okay?
Because we're still in phase 2, right?
Yeah.
And we're not sure on 15th if we're going to keep it in phase 2, move back to phase 1, go to phase 3.
So that takes us.
I'm sorry, one more thing under this. Well, if we're going to table it, I don't think we can do anything. I'll just scratch that until next month.
Sure. The high resolution against recent county highlights being proposed. So there are currently 4. Robin suggests that we pass an individual resolution for each one because that way they can be attached to each project. We have the Beulah Church Road commercial rezoning. And basically I have the last one, Cheryl sent me the last one that we passed. And I would think that we would just change what it was. Like Beulah Church Road will say, we recognize that proposal for the Village of Church Road commercial rezoning has been proposed to Union County in an area surrounded by or neighboring Wesley Chapel. It just kind of we go through our things, and then it says, you know, it talks about traffic and stuff, and traffic in the area is over capacity on Waxhaw Indian Trail and Village Church Road cannot sustain additional impact from development which will negatively impact, or from commercial development that will negatively impact existing property owners. And I think we should maybe say something because Mr. Espinoza is our resident. Some sort of wording that says a competing gas station would be detrimental to the existing Wesley Chapel
It
business.
would be detrimental to 2 gas stations in the village.
Existing Wesley Chapel business. So that's one. Then we have.
And I'm fine with all of them. I think I would leave the wording up to you.
I didn't want to do that one. So one is Howard Farm, Senior Housing off Randall. I think that's one we've already done, but we do it. It's got a name now.
If they change the name, we get another letter.
And then Park Place, which has mysteriously disappeared, but that also includes, I would say something about it includes apartments and townhomes and a commercial area. And then the Marnie sent us the letter, and I can't find this one, and I can forward you the email. The Walter Fields Days Weekly Home. She lives in Champion Forest.
It's going to be on Cumberland Road, but in Waxhaw.
And we had talked about, Rob and I had talked about some developments that don't directly border us. Maybe we don't get a resolution, but I think we had a resident reach out and ask us specifically for a letter. So that would be the 4th one.
And is that one in the town of Waxhaw?
It's not on the county
It's-
website.
So where it is it's Cumberland Road down more toward,
I know Champion Forest does.
yeah, it's past Champion Forest, you pass Lawson,
Okay.
and then it's down. So there's another municipality in between Wesley Chapel and that. And, you know, for your resolutions, you guys do whatever you feel comfortable. I was talking specifically to Amanda about if I'm producing a staff report, we need to have some kind of boundary, because I'll be writing staff reports all the time for the county and not for you guys. So I did not produce one for that development. No.
So
I think anything that directly affects the residents of our community, we need to look at. And all 4 of these do. And I'm fine with just making a motion to move forward with all 4 resolutions and leaving the exact wording up to Amanda.
any more discussion? So I will work with Cheryl on getting.
Lori seconded? Okay.
And I will get these out and I can put all copy of them. That gets us to a closed session with our attorney.
Amanda, if I may, Sherry, I would ask a favor.
I'm out of here.
If this room was full and we could all just go into the conference room and social distance and do one thing, but it is just so much easier just to say, Sherry, this is the last thing. Can we actually step out?
Good night. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you for being understanding.
Absolutely, no worries.
No, we would have to get up.
Do we have to close the door?
When she goes out.
We can tell it when we come in.
Whoever's in charge.
Is there a motion? Somebody make a motion?
Look at me. I always go first. I don't want to go first this time.
I'll go first. I thought it was very interesting. My little one had to come to the staff meeting with me today, and we walked outside, and he stepped off the curb, and he looked around and said, "They should really have a park out here. It'd be real nice." And I just thought that was super cute. This comes in line with like the survey. And, I thought it was cute. Mike, I don't know if I ever circled back with you, but are you still still willing to take down the tree, and David said he would help you if
It's
you
already
needed
down.
it. Oh, well, thank you, Mike.
I did about, I ran into Brad Horvath Sunday, a few days ago. It wasn't yesterday. Maybe it was Friday. And he said, "Hey, did you get the tree down?" And I'm like, "Oh no, I forgot all about it." And an hour later, it was on the ground.
Thank you.
So it's done.
Where is it? Just in the,
It's not cut out, it's just down on the ground. It's in the woods. It's not in the grass, it's not in the parking lot. It's down on the woods. One cut and done.
All right, next.
You're looking at me for. Just, I know there were some comments about transportation. I think ARPA meets Wednesday night. Just in general, everybody's aware of the budgetary constraints and everything, and it's slowing us down. And while things are out there, projects to where there's no outside spend, we're trying to move forward with resources, ones where they have to get a contractor in, are getting slowed down. But as long as the revenue constraints continue, and, I think we just have to be prepared that things can continue to slide on us and not get a lot of improvement as quickly as we'd like because of the general economic situation. So just sharing that. And the link's out there. Your board will tonight. You can happily watch it on Facebook Live.
Can I add something to what you said? I mean, technically, it's not a council comment. Okay.
No, you can't.
Okay. I just wanted to say, someone from DOT was in our project oversight committee meeting, and they are looking at, they're going to go through their ranks, but they're going to ask municipalities to start ranking their projects so that they know which ones to green light once money starts coming in. And they're hoping by the end of the year that they'll get to do that.
Where did all the money go?
they spend
They
it.
get a budget, and they spend it in different phases as they move forward.
Okay.
And we've already put money down for the roundabout at Potter or Wesley Chapel.
So that's-
I would assume that would be number one since we already put money down.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Robin. Next.
Well, I'll go because I'll piggyback off what Warren started. I've said this publicly and I'll say it again. The comments that I want to make to the county commissioners, whether they're sitting right here in tonight's meeting or whether it's at the next county commissioners meeting, is I understand that they don't control the DOT. I understand that that's something that they need to consider. But without the infrastructure, they need to consider slowing down development just haphazardly. And I don't know if I'm speaking just for myself or for this council in general, but a lot of people feel the same way. Everybody I've talked to says if they're not going to improve the infrastructure, they've got to slow down development. I understand use by right, but they're rezoning properties left and right, and it's really starting to not sit well with a lot of people. So,
I think that's one reason they have such low response too. People are just fed up. They're
and it would be different if they said, look, Public Works says don't do this, Planning and Zoning says don't do this, the residents say don't do this, the local municipality say don't do this, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
If they said that, but gave an explanation of why. Well, I have information you guys don't have, and I'm going to approve this, but they just say it's approved. They don't say why they're approving it against the negative recommendation. Everybody around them just does not pass the smell test. So, that's my 2 cents.
And if it was like used by right, you could complain about it, might not like it.
Right.
But it is what it is.
But when it's a zoning change and nobody recommends it, including the Public Works Department, it just stinks. At least you did.
So I've got 20 minutes to close the comments, so I just want to share with you guys. Actually, I only have one, and two got added to it just over the course of conversations tonight. One of the things that I love being on planning board, Robin, were your staff recommendations, and it made it so easy to understand, really the nuts and bolts of what's going on within planning. I would like for us to consider having a summary from the different committees and also from the people that make up the staff of Wesley Chapel, what
what needs to go on, or what is going on. What is going on in the areas that they see they may need to focus on. And the reason that I bring this up, Mike, was whenever you're talking about the issue at the park. Immediately my mind went to how so many of these large towns have gone from pretty, low-key, going about life situations to boom, all of a sudden they got interstates that are being stopped because of people that are angry. I think if we get that information in maybe a more summarized fashion, as opposed to looking at, and I'm not picking on Brandon, but I am saying, if we've got a summary from him, as opposed to 4 pages of I did this, I did this, I did this, and I did that, of maybe just areas that he sees we need to focus on and give him some levity with that, I think that would do us good. You said something earlier about not getting into the nuts and bolts. There's so many of these reports, finance being one, Cheryl, that sometimes I don't get into the nuts and bolts. But if I had a report from Cheryl saying, hey, this is the overview, just like the staff recommendations, I know for an uneducated, non-long-haired country boy, that would do me good. Number one. Number 2, Frank Capella last month shared that he felt like that we needed to put together a working group of citizens and also possibly councils to have a more unified voice, speaking out against the high-density situations that we're having on the borders. I think we don't need to let that rest.
I forgot. I'm meeting with Rick Becker in Mineral Springs and Elizabeth on Thursday.
All right. Okay.
It took a month to get a meeting set, but we got it.
All right. Check.
And we had a group similar to what you're talking about.
Yeah.
It was one representative from each municipality meeting Indian Trail. And it was represented by Stallings, Indian Trail, Weddington, Wesley Chapel. Help me out here. There was Waxhaw showed up for the first couple of meetings, and they stopped coming.
Wasn't that council members, though?
Yes, it was.
Right, but at the same time, I don't think if this was a public meeting, the residents showed up, I don't think he was turned away. But basically, it started off specifically about stuff like CRTPO or the road commission or anything like that. You would think when we go to these meetings, since we're all having exactly the same problems, we would all vote the same, and we weren't. And we said, why aren't we? We all have the same problems. And they're like, yeah, we should have a louder voice because we only have one out of how many people that are on these committees. So yeah, Frank Capella's, right on the ball that we need to, the group that was Residents for Responsible Growth. We had different municipalities, all seemed to have the same problem. And we started making some of the county commissioners very nervous with that.
Well, going back to last month's quote, Cheryl, by Margaret Mead.
I was wondering where the quote was.
I think the unified voice and us speaking up is the way to be the loud voice. This month's quote, he may not be quite the same stature as Margaret Mead, but that's Lombardi.
Ooh, there you go.
It's an individual
sports reference.
That's right. It's an individual commitment to a group effort. That's what makes a teamwork, a company work, a society work, and a civilization work. It tickles me that we've got the amount of people that have stepped up to be on the focus groups. That tickles me. It disappoints me that we don't have 1,000 yet responses to surveys, but it tickles me that we've got people like Brad Horvath, who has been so much a part of this village. Instead of saying, I'm done, I'm walking away, he still wants to be a part of this village and a part of the plans and a part of the growing process of this village. That tickles me. This Lombardi said it. That is all.
All right, motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second, all in favor? Motion carried, y'all want to
Perfect timing.
That's perfect timing.
George, give us up to date on that